In Canada, as the American national anthem is booed, and Justin Trudeau tells his country to choose Canadian goods. And as the Prime Minister discusses closer ties with the UK's European neighbours, he says his relationship with the US President is in its early days. Also ahead. Israel launches attacks inside a West Bank refugee camp as Benjamin Netanyahu says he's preparing to discuss victory over Hamas with Donald Trump in the White House. A former Harrods employee accuses both Mohammed Al-Fayed and his brother Salah of assaulting her while she worked at the store. Focus on her work, not her outfits, why Kensington Palace will no longer be releasing details of what the Princess of Wales wears. And coming up in the sport, a humiliating afternoon for Manchester City and Pep Guardiola as they lose 5-1 at Arsenal. Plus, we'll take a first look at tomorrow's front pages. That's coming up in our press preview from 10:30. Hello there, good evening. The Star-Spangled Banner was booed and American alcohol barred from sale in one Canadian province as the tariffs imposed by America's new president on Canada led to a perhaps predictable response. Donald Trump showed no sign of stepping back, saying his northern neighbour would cease to exist as a viable country without American subsidies. His tariffs, though, have now led to retaliatory measures from Canada, with Mexico set to provide details of its response tomorrow. Here's Sir Keir Starmer said he wanted to see strong trading relations with the US. We'll hear more from him in a moment. But first, our international correspondent Diana Magnay has this report.
Tariff!
True to his word on the campaign trail, Donald Trump hitting his two closest trading partners, Mexico and Canada, with a 25% tariff on all goods and a 10% carve-out for Canadian crude oil. And if Canada doesn't like it, that suggestion again posted on Truth Social that Canada should become America's 51st state. The Canadian Prime Minister hitting back with a 25% tariff of his own and a message for the American people.
As I have consistently said, tariffs against Canada will put your jobs at risk, potentially shutting down American auto assembly plants and other manufacturing facilities. They will raise costs for you, including food at the grocery stores and gas at the pump.
Mexico, too, promising countermeasures, saying Mexican sovereignty was not up for negotiation. How soon do you think that the US consumers actually going to start feeling the impact of all of this?
If they really go into effect on Tuesday, it will be an overnight shock to the U.S. economy. If we look at, the U.S. auto industry and how integrated that is across North America, we're talking about shocks across the entire U.S. economy, and it'll become very clear very quickly who actually pays for tariffs.
A 10% additional tariff on Chinese goods, too, on everything from clothes to consumer electronics like smartphones. The Foreign Ministry saying Donald Trump's stated reason for the tariffs, fentanyl, is America's problem and one they've worked with the US to fix. Fentanyl and illegal immigration seem to be more a pretext than they are a justification for these tariffs. As we heard from Justin Trudeau, only 1% of inflows of fentanyl or illegal migrants come in via the northern border. And if you weaken the Mexican economy, you'll make that southern border more unstable rather than less. North American friends and neighbours bracing now for a tariff war which undoes deeply integrated supply chains and long-standing cooperation. Listen closely and you'll hear the boos behind the US national anthem. Canadian ice hockey fans making their feelings known. Diana Magnay, Sky News, Washington.
Well, the US president's barrage of tariffs against Canada, Mexico and China could have a significant impact on global trade. By imposing a tariff, a country is in effect putting a tax on the goods imported from another country. So if goods worth $100,000 are imported, subject to a 25% tariff, there would be a $25,000 charge on them. Importers are responsible for paying these levies when their shipments arrive and are likely to pass the costs onto consumers in the form of higher prices, even though Donald Trump campaigned strongly on Joe Biden's record on inflation. Another fallout of tariffs is a potential cycle of retaliation or a trade war, with a sanctioned country deciding to hit back with tariffs of its own. Supply chains could also be disrupted, especially if an industry is heavily integrated across different nations. And economists say this again could lead to prices going up as it adds to inflation. In the case of President Trump's tariffs, one economic research company thinks these measures could trigger a rebound in consumer price inflation later on this year of between 3% and 4%, making it much harder for the US Federal Reserve to lower interest rates. Well, this is what the Canadian High Commissioner to the United Kingdom had to say to Sky News a little earlier today.
Canada is one of the most open economies in the world. We trade with the whole world. Our biggest trading partner is the United States, but they're not the only one. And we can do business with a lot of other countries too, including the United Kingdom and the EU and the Indo-Pacific, where we have very effective trade agreements already in place. As the Prime Minister has said, everything is on the table, and we will approach this in a rational way that affects different regions and sectors and parts of Canada fairly and equitably, because this must be a totally cohesive Team Canada effort. We're considering all of the options to make sure that our response is strong and vigorous. And I would just say to our allies around the world, watch this closely. You could be next. And in the meantime, stand by your friends.
Well, Diana Magnay joins us live now from Washington. Diana, we saw some of the increasing emotion, the protests in your report, heard it there too from the Canadian High Commissioner. But this is big, escalating already, with the truism that trade wars are easy to start but difficult to stop.
Absolutely, and strange to start trade wars with your closest allies, because it's not only difficult to stop, but also extremely difficult to break down and unravel those incredibly intertwined supply chains that cross across the North American market, which is why the Wall Street Journal, in an editorial from the editorial board, called this trade war the dumbest trade war in history, which Donald Trump, incidentally, took great exception to on Truth Social. But you have to question why he's doing it. Is it about trade? Is it about fentanyl? Given the fact that Canada allows so few illegal migrants or illicit drugs into the US, is it actually about Donald Trump's imperialist, expansionist ambitions? And I think those that perhaps shook off the idea that his comments about Greenland or about the Panama Canal or about Canada becoming the 51st state are becoming more and more concerned as he makes good on pretty much every one of his campaign promises. And today we have the US Secretary of State Marco Rubio in Panama, for example, and he does not seem to be backing down from that pretty aggressive rhetoric, telling them that unless they reduce supposed Chinese influence over the Panama Canal, then they can expect immediate retaliation too. These kinds of approaches, these kinds of measures to supposed allies are something that countries all around the world are going to be watching and taking extremely seriously.
Diana, live for us there in Washington. Thank you. Well, Sir Keir Starmer will travel to Brussels tomorrow to discuss closer ties on defence and security with the European Union. The shadow of the new president across the Atlantic, though, will never be far away. The Prime Minister said today, as he hosted his German counterpart at Chequers, that it is early days in his relationship with Donald Trump. Here's our political correspondent, Tamara Cohen.
Lunch at Chequers for Keir Starmer and the German Chancellor, digesting the news that Donald Trump has started his promised trade war, although the Prime Minister hopeful the UK won't be hit with tariffs.
It's early days, and what I want to see is strong trading relations, and in the discussions that I've had with President Trump, that's what we have centred on.
But the EU has been told it will be next. This was Donald Trump on Friday.
Am I going to impose tariffs on the European Union? Absolutely. Absolutely. The European Union has treated us so terribly.
It's quite a backdrop to Starmer's first visit to EU leaders in Brussels tomorrow to try and improve relations. up to a point.
I've been very clear since I became Prime Minister that I do want a reset of the relationship between the UK and the EU. That does not involve a return to the European Union. We had a referendum here on that, and that matter is settled.
We broadly know what the UK is asking for in these talks: closer cooperation on defence, on energy, and cutting back some of those reams of Brexit paperwork for businesses exporting to Europe. But the question everyone on the EU side is asking is what's Starmer prepared to give in return?
Well, we're still waiting for concrete proposals coming from the British side. Labour did make quite a number of promising announcements for the elections. Since then, we haven't heard too much from them, have we?
The Conservatives say the government should be putting all its efforts into a US trade deal that they were unable to strike.
One of the big opportunities for the UK right now would be to get much closer to the US, our biggest trading partner. We have a trade deal with the European Union already, so alongside that, a trade deal with the US would be a big win.
A lot's changed since Brexit. The Ukraine war has shaken up security. The US is upending global trade. The UK is looking for common ground in all directions.
Well, tomorrow joins me live from Downing Street. Defence the focus tomorrow. Right now, though, it's tariffs. The EU countries know full well they're in Donald Trump's sights when it comes to tariffs. What about the UK, though? Is Sir Keir Starmer hoping the UK could avoid the worst?
Well, look, they know it's a risk. Donald Trump said in his election campaign he would put tariffs on all foreign goods, but they're very much hoping the UK may not get tariffs or not get the worst of them. Keir Starmer's put a lot of effort into this relationship with Donald Trump and continues to today, as you saw in my report. The UK mainly exports services to the US, and there is a trade surplus. But certainly, even if the UK avoids the worst of it and Donald Trump follows through on his threat to put tariffs on the EU, for which the EU would no doubt retaliate, the UK could still be seriously affected. The business secretary last week said the UK has a very globalised economy and is very exposed to rises in inflation. So they know it could still have an impact. And that is a interesting backdrop to Keir Starmer's trip to Europe tomorrow, to Brussels, to talk about defence and talk about easing trade. There are some political opponents, like the Liberal Democrats, who say this is a moment to increase ties with the EU, to go back into the customs union and increase trade there. There are others, like the Conservatives, who say we should go hell for leather for a US trade deal. And as Keir Starmer goes to Europe to talk about working together against Russian aggression, I think he's going to feel increasing pressure to try and pick a side when it comes to trade.
Tomorrow, live for us there in Downing Street. Thank you. Well, to the Middle East now, and Israel attacked a vehicle in Gaza today, wounding 4 Palestinians, but claimed the attack did not breach the ceasefire between the two sides. The Israeli military said it was targeting a suspicious vehicle moving towards northern Gaza outside the route laid down by the ceasefire agreement. A boy initially thought to have been killed in the strike was later resuscitated by medics. Meanwhile, several buildings in the occupied West Bank city of Jenin were blown up by the IDF as part of an Israeli military operation it says was targeted at local militants. The director of Jenin's government hospital said the facility was damaged in the demolition of the buildings, but that there had been no casualties. Well, Israel's Prime Minister is travelling to the United States, where he says he will discuss victory over Hamas with Donald Trump in the White House. He also says he'll start negotiations for the next phase of the Gaza ceasefire deal when he meets the president's Middle East envoy. A former Harrods employee has claimed that Mohammed Al-Fayed and his brother Salah assaulted her while she worked for the department store back in the 1990s. Rachel Lowe says she was subjected to invasive sexual health tests, surveillance and inappropriate touching while working for the brothers. Now she wants those who enabled her abuse to be held accountable. A warning, Gurpreet Narwan's report contains descriptions of sexual assault that viewers might find distressing.
In her early 20s, Rachel moved to London to work on the shop floor at Harrods. She was soon spotted by the chairman, Mohammed Al-Fayed, and promoted to be his brother's personal assistant. It involved a trip to Monaco, where she stayed on Salah Al-Fayed's yacht.
You're entering this whole new lifestyle that is shiny and new and exciting.
The excitement didn't last long. Soon after, things took a darker turn.
I'd been asleep for a few hours, and I felt a movement on the bed. I woke up with that panic of, first, where was I? And I remember saying something like, "What are you doing?" And Salah said, "I'm lonely." I just went ramrod still. And I didn't sleep. Thinking if I moved, if I turned over, if I did any body movement whatsoever, he would misinterpret that as me giving him an indication that it was okay to touch me. And I remember in the morning aching because I'd been so tense the whole night.
Rachel says she left after a month of repeated sexual advances, returning to her old job at Harrods in London. She thought she had escaped Salah Al-Fayed, but soon afterwards, his brother, Mohammed, the chairman of Harrods, also preyed on her. One day, she was told to go to his flat to pick up paperwork she needed for a sabbatical.
He said, "Come sit next to me. If you treat me right, if you're nice to me, I can make things happen for you." And I was sitting down next to him, and he put his arm around me, and his hand started going further up my skirt, higher and higher. The more I resisted, the more upset he became.
Allegations against Mohammed Al-Fayed first surfaced decades ago, but he vehemently denied them. But the police watchdog is now reviewing the Met Police's handling of those cases. And the force has widened its search to look at associates who may have facilitated and assisted that abuse. It means the prospect of criminal charges is still on the cards, even though the direct perpetrators have now died. In a statement to Sky News, Harrods said, "Harrods supports the bravery of all women in coming forward. Their claims point to the breadth of abuse by Mohammed Fayed and again raise serious allegations against his brother, Salah Fayed. We continue to encourage all survivors to make their claims to the Harrods scheme. Any claims in relation to the behaviour of current staff involved in any of the allegations will be investigated." It was the darling of British retail, a British institution. But the abuse that took place was an open secret, and Harrods is now facing a reckoning that has some way still to go. Gurpreet Narwan, Sky News.
Convicted killer Tony Martin, who shot dead a 16-year-old intruder in his home in 1999, has died at the age of 80. Martin was jailed in 2000 for the killing after his claim of self-defence was rejected. He was released 3 years later after his murder conviction was reduced to manslaughter on appeal. Families of victims of the Washington plane crash visited the scene of the disaster earlier today. They were given a police escort to the shore of the Potomac River, where the plane went down. 67 people were killed in the crash, one of the deadliest in US history. Well, authorities tonight confirmed that 55 victims had been recovered and positively identified, and an operation to recover wreckage from the water will start tomorrow at first light. Well, there have already been convictions for paedophiles who have used AI to create images of child sex abuse. The government, though, has confirmed it wants to go further with what it called world-leading legislation to make the software which can create such images illegal. It comes after warnings that AI-generated child abuse imagery is being produced at a chilling rate and is disturbingly realistic. Here's our social affairs correspondent, Becky Johnson.
Open the door now, police!
Police suspect there are paedophiles inside this house in Hertfordshire.
Robert, who was this? What's that? Open the door, it's going in. Open the door. Come out. Someone get hold of him.
2 men were arrested. 1 was later charged. Dogs that are specially trained to sniff out hidden digital devices searched inside the house and cars. Their handlers showed Home Office Minister Jess Phillips the kind of devices dogs have detected.
They're maybe not as clinical as us, and we're looking for those finite small amounts to then give us the grounds to maybe take a car or van apart.
Increasingly, images of child abuse being seized have been created using artificial intelligence. The government's now introducing new laws to tackle the threat.
Anybody in the country's child's image could be used to make this horrendous content that fuels child abuse in our country. It is a massive battle.
Under the legislation, it'll be illegal to create, share or possess AI tools used to generate child sexual abuse material. Owning manuals that teach people how to use AI to sexually abuse young people will also be banned. Running websites that share child abuse content or grooming advice will become a criminal offence, and Border Force officers will have the power to demand access to digital devices from suspected offenders entering the UK. The Home Secretary has warned the increase in AI images is accelerating offline abuse. Last year, Hugh Nelson from Bolton was jailed for 18 years. He'd received real images of children sent to him by a global network of paedophiles, then used AI to turn them into sexual abuse images. Few would question the need for stronger legislation, but for crimes committed online around the world, will UK laws work?
This problem is almost out of control.
But the US government and US tech companies are moving away from regulation. So how effective can these measures actually be?
These measures, the first of their kind in the world of which we're aware, can set a standard and can inspire other governments to do the same. Certainly it is a global problem, and the UK can only do so much on its own.
The need to tackle these crimes is clear, but any solution will require countries and tech companies to have the will to work together. Becky Johnson, Sky News.
Well, breaking news from the world of sport. Let's get the latest. Here's Raoul at Sky Sports News.
Staying connected is vital for business. Sky Business sponsors this report.
The end of a playing career doesn't always mean the end of a journey in football. Tom Reynolds took a completely different route.
I joined Charlton Athletic at the age of 9 and then stayed there for 3 seasons and left around 12. And then the next year I joined West Ham, played just for 1 season and then got released. It wasn't a tough release, it was just basically you're not good enough, and that was fine. I'd played football for 10 years. I wanted to use that knowledge and go into something, and everyone that weren't making it as footballers were going into coaching and going into managers or physiotherapists, and for me it was a case that I was like, there must be something else.
From Reading and Charlton to working in analytics, then on to Russia with Lokomotiv Moscow and Germany with Eintracht Frankfurt. Tom has spent over a decade behind the scenes in football.
At the time, I'd never heard of performance analysis. It was only until I went to university that I knew that was an avenue. Performance analysis can lead to 5, 6, 7 different roles now.
Do you ever now miss playing?
Yeah, I think I still find it where I'm talking to a player or I'm talking to a coach where players are around and you see them going out on the football pitch and you're the one dragging the equipment or setting up the equipment, and you're like, just want to put my boots on and get involved again. But I mean, there's a reason as to why I didn't become a professional footballer, and that was because I wasn't good enough. But also I'm proud of what I've achieved.
Breaking news, and England are under-17s world champions. They produce a remarkable comeback to beat Spain in the final in India.
You're 11 years old and there's a proper transfer fee being paid for you. What's that like?
I wasn't aware of it. I didn't arrive at City thinking, well, I've had a fee paid for me. I just remember getting there thinking this is a level up.
At what point did you think, I've made it?
I don't think I ever thought that.
Really?
No. When I got to about 16, 17, I was playing for England, I got my scholarship, I got my pro. I think I started to realise that I've got a chance. I don't think I ever thought I've actually made it. We knew we were in a good spot, but at the same time, we also knew that like every year, when we're getting closer to under 16s, a bunch of our mates would be released at 16.
And look, I won't ask you figures, but are we talking big money here?
For a 17-year-old, yeah. In the grand scheme of football, maybe not, but when you've gone from earning a scholar wage to earning professional money at Man City level professional money, then yeah, it's a lot of money. It also then did bring me back down to, right, well, me worrying about getting that new contract, winning the World Cup's not going to help that, which I thought it probably would have, but it turned out it didn't.
After Manchester City, Anderson played third-tier football in the USA. 0 appearances at Wycombe, including 2 non-league loan spells. Then came the drop. Lancaster City, Bootle, and an appearance for Kendal Town in the 9th tier of English football. But Anderson is now at the top of the game again, in a different capacity. He's a financial advisor for young footballers in the Premier League and EFL, sharing some of the lessons he's learned in the game.
The difference between saving and investing, with an ISA you can put £20,000 in a year and that money grows tax-free. Even if I'd have just left like 5 grand of that 30 that I spoke about, who knows what that'd be worth today?
Was it difficult to let that dream go?
Don't get me wrong, there was times when the World Cup was on and I remember just like going to bed and I'd struggle to sleep because I'm like, how has this happened? I seen like teammates I won the World Cup with playing in the actual first team men's World Cup. It wasn't necessarily I was sat there thinking, oh, I should have been playing in that. It was more, how am I not even getting a game for Lancaster?
Years earlier, but
My enjoyment of what I do now overrides my enjoyment when I played. I'm getting a lot of fulfillment out of looking after people, taking the stress away from them because they don't have to worry about the finances.
And then with the extra money, opening investment accounts.
Your own experiences must help you an awful lot.
Sky Business sponsors this report.
Raoul, thank you. Now, finally, the message from Kensington Palace from now on over the Princess of Wales might be summed up as, it's what she's saying, not what she wears. Details of her clothes, their designer or the brand behind them will no longer be routinely released. One feted former magazine editor, though, told us companies will still find a way of publicising their association with Kate, as Matthew Thompson reports, and a warning, there is flash photography from the start.
She's one of the most photographed women in the world. Every outfit analysed, every designer identified, every item coveted. But now the Princess of Wales is drawing a line. From now on, Kensington Palace will not be telling us what she's wearing. Since joining the royal family in 2011, the princess's wardrobe has been meticulously documented by the press, and the palace played a part, supplying details to journalists about her outfits. But that's going to stop. The change follows Kate's return to public life after undergoing treatment for cancer. She'll continue to support British fashion, just this week visiting a Welsh knitwear factory. But while the palace won't be commenting on her clothes, the former Vogue editor responsible for this iconic cover shoot said that wouldn't stop others from doing so.
I'm sure that those brands who Catherine wears will do their own PR and be sending out their own press releases. She is not saying that nobody should know what she wears. I think what she's saying is she doesn't feel that her formal role is to alert us all to it.
And it's firmly in the fashion industry's interest that people know what she wears. Many brands have benefited significantly from the so-called Kate effect, the phenomenon of anything she wears flying off the shelves.
Let's talk about the boots Kate Middleton has had for almost 20 years.
Not to mention the dozens of fan accounts on social media who pore over every outfit.
3 ways you can dress like Kate Middleton.
Outside Kensington Palace today, not everyone admitted to being directly swayed by her style.
We don't look to like the royals when it comes to what, like fashion. No, not at all.
She's never put a foot out of place. Nobody has ever been able to find anything wrong with her the whole time, and she's just a lady of elegance.
She can inspire, definitely. She's a very beautiful woman and she has a beautiful sense of style, but I don't think it's that important to me.
The princess's fashion choices will no doubt continue to grab attention and column inches. But if this move shifts even some attention onto her work rather than her wardrobe, then for Catherine, it may be a trend worth setting. Matthew Thompson, Sky News.
Well, that was Sky News at 10. Coming up, we'll take a first look at tomorrow's newspapers in the press preview. Tonight, we're joined by the broadcaster and author, Natasha Devon, and the economics editor of The Spectator, Kate Andrews. Lovely to see both of you. So among the stories, we'll be discussing this on the front of the Financial Times about tonight's top story here on Sky News. The headline for the paper, Trump faces a backlash from business as trade war sounds an inflationary alarm. That and plenty more when we come back.
I'm Deborah Haynes, Sky Security and Defence Editor. The reality of life under Russian fire. People don't want to leave even though help is here to evacuate them. They say they want to sort out their belongings first. It's absolute chaos. Fire, shouts the commander. There's a dash to safety as Russian drones will be trying to find this position.
We've now got to wait inside the shelter to see if there is incoming.
I've been covering Russia's full-scale war since it began, witnessing the terror and the trauma.
When rockets fall, I try to hide my head under my toys.
Illustrating Ukraine's lost childhood, hopes and dreams framed by war. Conflict in the Middle East is another major focus.
An incredibly dangerous moment.
We saw the missiles streaking across the sky. We saw the intercept going up, and then we saw the explosions when the intercepts were successful.
With global threats rising, I also explored defence and security in the UK and across NATO. This US aircraft carrier is operating in European waters in a deliberate show of force. This is routine training for NATO. But should Russia's war with Ukraine escalate significantly, pilots like these could be called upon to go into combat for real. Tucked away in the National Archives are some of the UK's old defence plans. The scale of this bunker underlines how seriously governments took the threat of nuclear attack and global conflict. Should allies listen to Vladimir Putin's sabre-rattling?
No, they shouldn't, and they don't.
Sky News, the full story first.
Mandatory evacuation, you must leave!
For many people, Harvey is far from over.
People here believe the water will be this deep for weeks.
I'm Greg Milam, and I'm Sky's chief North of England correspondent.
Are you trying to run me over, Sir Philip?
No, go away.
Look like it, sir. Will you respond to those who made accusations, Sir Philip?
Can you go away?
Sky News, the full story first.
We've got your Sunday mornings covered. From the front page and the sounds of the streets to the voices of the people who make the major calls and big picture politics beyond Westminster. We'll put you at the heart of our story.
I'm ready. Are you?
Join me, Trevor Phillips, Sunday mornings on Sky News.
Weeknights on Sky News.
This is your chance. Tell people. Welcome to the Politics Hub.
Our police force has apologised. If you want to find out about Grimsby, you come to the docks.
I'm live in Jerusalem.
Are you not concerned that that could lead to all-out war?
Hello there, good evening. There are fears of an upsurge in violence. What's at stake here?
You are watching the press preview, a first look at the front pages as they arrive.
Hello there, watching the press preview, a first look at what is on the front pages. In the next half hour, then we'll see what's making the headlines with the broadcaster and author, Natasha Devon, and the economics editor of The Spectator, Kate Andrews. Lovely to see both of you. Welcome.
Thank you.
So as ever, let's check out the front pages. Let's start with the Financial Times and the looming threat of a trade war sparked by Donald Trump's foreign imports tariffs, leading the Financial Times, which says the likely effect on consumer prices could lead to a backlash from US business and his own party. The Guardian says the new tariffs have sparked fears of a global trade war. The Telegraph says the European Union has told Donald Trump it won't be bullied over trade despite the threat of tariffs. But as Keir Starmer tries to rebuild our relationship with the EU, the Mail says experts fear UK businesses will also pay a high price. On those Starmer efforts, The Times says France's President Macron will tell the PM tomorrow that Brexit has clearly failed. The Eye says a major government defence review is to warn that the UK needs to develop its own Iron Dome missile defence shield to protect from possible attack by Russia. The Sun, meanwhile, pictures a young British man killed in Ukraine, apparently in a Russian drone strike. The sister of Ruth Perry, the head teacher who took her own life after her school was downgraded by Ofsted, warns in the Metro that a new traffic light style system to replace single-word ratings is just a dangerous rehash. The Express speaks to actress and care campaigner Ruthie Henschel about her elderly mother's care home, and she tells the paper that she'd rather be dead than ever be put into a home. And finally, the Daily Star says our cities are being invaded by gangs of rats, thanks to the effects of global warming. The headline, Squeaky Blinders. Boom, boom. Joined, as you can see, by Natasha and Kate. Very interesting set of headlines, to be fair. Much of it looking ahead. But let us take a look, first of all, at what has happened already, which is Donald Trump has put corking tariffs on its nearest neighbours and a bit extra on China. Kate, how seismic do you think this is as we look towards retaliation? Mexico coming tomorrow, already heard something from Canada.
It's absolutely massive. North America is now engaged in a full-blown trade war. Donald Trump decided to go ahead with those 25% import tariffs on both Canada and Mexico. He has made some exceptions for Canadian energy resources. That's going to have a tariff of 10%. And he's also slapped a 10% tariff on China. Understandably, and as expected, Canada and Mexico are talking about retaliation, as is China, although we don't have the full details yet. This is a full-blown trade war in the making. Reasons to be optimistic that potentially there could still be a climb down. A lot of the tariffs from Canada's side don't come into effect for 3 weeks, which seems like quite a natural negotiation period.
Tuesday's the day for a lot of this, though, isn't it? But do continue.
For America, yes. Yeah. But Canada is saying we are retaliating in a couple of weeks for the most part. That could be a natural area to negotiate. When this happened back in 2017, when Donald Trump first came into office, he slapped tariffs on Canada and vice versa, and they quietly went away on both sides within a year. But this is a different level. We are talking substantial taxes on American business and now on Canadian and Mexican business as well if they do decide to retaliate. And markets are very nervous. We should expect to see some major moves tomorrow. There's already warning that the stock market is going to take its toll. There's warnings about inflation because these are taxes. These are taxes that are going to see the prices of goods and of food and of necessities go up for consumers. I think it's something like 2/3 of vegetables that are bought in the United States come from Mexico. So Donald Trump on the campaign trail promised to bring down costs, a big promise, not something that's always in a politician's control. He also promised tariffs. These things really do not gel well. He's opted for tariffs, and he himself has now said there's going to be pain attached to this.
And as you said, a large part of his election campaign was criticising Joe Biden for sitting on big inflation and introducing inflationary measures. The measures are on things like food, from meat to orange juice. You mentioned some of the veg, appliances, rubber tyres, lumber, paper products, clothing. Small amount on energy. Obviously, Canada is a very big energy exporter. We're used to, says the one organisation, we're used to having frictionless trade in North America. That's been going on for some people for their whole lifetime. So going from free trade to 25% is really pretty dramatic, and I think it's going to lead to a huge shock for the US economy. We're just coming out of a series of shocks, be it COVID, be it energy inflation. You know, to introduce another one almost self-imposed on you as Europe and indeed the UK sits to wait to see what tariffs are coming our way.
It's been described as using a sledgehammer when a scalpel was required. And I also don't see how it's going to achieve Trump's stated aims of stemming the flow of both migrants and fentanyl across the borders, unless he's planning to inflict so much pain on neighbouring countries that they make greater efforts in those regards. But how quickly can that happen, and how much will the American, Canadian and Mexican public have to suffer in the meantime?
Absolutely. And changing the rate at which charging comes in as well, $800 and under, you know, don't worry about that. But that's gone now, hasn't it? Which means that, first of all, they think small chemical stuff coming in, the fentanyl you talked about, but also some of the big Chinese companies like Shein, Temu, the big, you know, the importers who have low-value items. All the packages are going to be open now to be examined to face tariffs on it.
This is a crackdown on cheap products. And from a philosophical perspective, if we look at somebody like the Vice President, J.D. Vance, he thinks that there's a strong moral case to do this. He believes in protecting American industry. He believes in this kind of tax. He thinks taxes should go up to protect American business. But Donald Trump has always been a lot less clear on this. He tends to use tariffs, as you say, a negotiating tactic to get all different kinds of things, from immigration agreements to crackdowns on drug gangs. What Donald Trump really doesn't like is when the economy suffers. He likes to be able to say, I am the guy under which the economy thrives for American citizens. And again, tariffs are going to make that a lot more difficult. I think if you're Canadian, you're truly baffled, because we know about...
Well, you're already protesting at the US anthem at sports stadiums, aren't you? There we are, yeah.
Well, I think
a lot of booing.
It's a very interesting decision Trump has made to lump Canada in with Mexico and China. When it comes to China, it's a whole raft of things that the president takes issue with. It's not just about the cheap goods coming in, it's about defense, it's about trust, it's about IP. When it comes to Mexico, we know it's about the illegal immigration there and the drugs that are coming over the border. Illegal immigration has been increasing from Canada, but we are not talking nearly the same levels. And drugs as well. I mean, this is minuscule compared to what comes from other countries. I think if you're Canadian, you are particularly shocked going into this week.
Yeah. OK, well, there's the headline in the FT. Trump faces backlash from business as trade war sounds inflation alarm. It's from business in the US, remember, that's starting to complain. We'll come back to Sir Keir Starmer and his meetings in Europe in a moment. First of all, though, Natasha, Ofsted, the idea that it's changing after complaints about the one-word assessment, you know, that people were very critical of, and still some concern about the new system. So what is the new system looking like?
The new system is going to be assessing schools over 8 different criteria, which include, as well as academic attainment, things like well-being and attendance and leadership. And as somebody who has worked in education now for a decade and a half and has visited hundreds of schools, I'm tentatively positive about this, because with the old system where you were just given one word, a word like outstanding or inadequate, some schools are outstanding in some ways and inadequate in others. And of course, all children are different and have different needs from their schools. So I didn't think that it gave parents that definitive idea of what the school would be like, as has been claimed in some quarters. There are some concerns, though, that this really isn't changing that much. And of course, with the tragic case of Ruth Perry, it wasn't just about the ruling from Ofsted. It was about the entire inspection and the way that inspections are conducted, being unnecessarily pressured on school staff and almost going in with an attitude of we're looking for problems rather than trying to see what it is that you're doing as a school on your best day, and allowing teachers to show what they do in a natural environment. So I wonder whether, you know, the mental health training that's been given to Ofsted inspectors was quite minimal, and whether the criticisms are about whether or not these overhauls go far enough.
But the one word that everyone talks about, you know, was just one part of a very big report that parents could then read. So you don't want to get rid of all of that assessment, because parents do find it extremely useful, don't they, when they're assessing, you know, where to go to school, but also where to live.
That is true. However, like I say, any parent will tell you that there could be an outstanding school around the corner, according to a one-word Ofsted grade, that would be catastrophic for their child because of the way that it operates. All pupils have different needs. And if I was a parent, and for example, I would be very interested in things like behaviour and inclusion, which are some of the categories that are now going to be assessed.
Interesting. OK, we'll look out for more on that. In the meantime, back to Sir Keir Starmer, his meeting in Brussels. It's about defence. You know, if we look also at the time, so there's the defence line. UK Iron Dome needed to guard against Russian attack. This is the defence review. He's going to be talking about defence in Europe as well. But just on the European question, I'm going to knock onto the Times as well. French tell the UK to eat humble pie on Brexit. So the idea of getting close via something like defence is how it's shaping up for the PM tomorrow.
There's a lot going on in Brussels. There's discussions of Brexit. As you say, they're primarily there to talk about defence, but they're not going to be able to avoid the topic of tariffs either. And now that Donald Trump has also suggested that he has his eyes set on Europe. This is an interesting decision on the part of President Macron to imply to Keir Starmer that Brexit has failed and, you know, that there should be some element of humble pie here as he arrives. First of all, the idea of Brexit does not mean that you turn your back on your most important allies when it comes to defence. The idea that the UK's Prime Minister would show up for a conversation like this, I think, is almost besides the point of Brexit. But the issue for all of them, whether you're in or outside of the European Union, is that Donald Trump is now demanding that you spend 5% of your GDP on defence, something America does not even do. Realistically speaking, a lot of people think that means that he wants them to strive for 2.5%, but we're talking about finding billions and billions of pounds on top of what's already being spent at a time where you just have stagnant growth in the UK and across Europe. They have far bigger problems on their hands with North America's trade war, and certainly threats coming from countries like Russia and China, than they do to still be, you know, fighting over something that happened years ago now, especially when this is supposed to be an attempt at a reset. It's supposed to be an attempt to talk about these bigger issues that all of them have to face. Surely that's got to be the priority as Starmer goes to Brussels this week.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how those discussions shape up. As you said, lots going on there. Anyway, stay with us if you don't mind, Natasha, Kate. Lots more still to come in our programme, including I'd Rather Be Dead Than in a Home. This is the actress Ruthie Henschel. So we'll have more on the state of our social care system next.
Jubilation in the streets, while some emotional.
This is a political victory for Prime Minister Modi and his Hindu Nationalist Party.
I'm Neville Lazarus and I'm Sky's reporter based in Delhi.
Companies like these are helping India in its trajectory to be a serious player in space exploration. Sky News, get the full story first.
We arrive. A secret hospital hidden in the Myanmar jungle, treating the victims of this bloody war. This is Myanmar today. Its military rulers don't want the world to see, but we have.
I fight for my own future. I fight for my generation's future.
This is an actual crime. They don't care for that.
Myanmar army is only a couple of kilometers away. So this is a major humanitarian disaster.
They were prepared for protest, but not on this scale.
How difficult is this to police tonight?
Off the scale.
I'm Dan Whitehead, Sky News' West of England and Wales correspondent.
The last smoke and steam rises into the sky above Blast Furnace 4.
Today is a day in history. Sky News, get the full story first, free, wherever you get your news.
Welcome to the world.
Our new podcast, starting now. It's very exciting. Every week we'll be reporting from the world's trouble spots.
We get to hold those in positions of power accountable, and we get to ask the questions that the audience, the listeners, want to know about.
And that's why it is so important that people tune in, come along for the road, come along for the journey. It'll be fun.
Our app gives you the very best of Sky News wherever you are. Breaking news, videos and analysis.
Evidence of the crisis.
Podcasts, watching us live.
I'm live in Jerusalem.
Wherever you get your podcast.
All in one place and all at just the touch of a screen. The Sky News app. Get the full story first.
I saw police being forceful, pushing young men and women to the ground as they made almost 100 arrests. Will the cold affect your voters?
Well, we have a lot of tremendous support.
Free, wherever you get your news. The people here know that worse storms may well be on their way. I'm Martha Kellner and I'm Sky's US correspondent based here in Los Angeles.
Mandatory evacuation, you must leave!
For many people, Harvey is far from over.
People here believe the water will be this deep for weeks.
I'm Greg Milam and I'm Sky's Chief North of England correspondent.
Are you trying to run me over, Sir Philip?
No, go away.
Look like it, sir. Will you respond to those who made accusations, Sir Philip?
Can you go away?
Sky News, the full story first.
Welcome back. You are watching the press preview with me once again, the broadcaster and author Natasha Devon, and the economics editor of The Spectator, Kate Andrews. Welcome back to both of you. Natasha, let's look at the Daily Express. We know that social care has been kicked into the long grass once again, but this is somebody speaking from the heart about possible changes that need to be seen and what's happening in care homes now.
Yes, it's the actress Ruthie Henschel who was reflecting on the last year of her mother's life, her mother Gloria, who had dementia. And it's her view that the people who were managing the care home where her mother was were turning her away when she wanted to visit her more frequently, to use powers that were given to them during COVID to stop the spread of potentially fatal diseases, but are no longer strictly necessary and also can be particularly damaging in the case of people who have dementia, who require an advocate to ensure that they are being cared for in the right way. So she is lobbying to bring in something called Gloria's Law, which is where if you are in a care home, you are allowed a designated person. It can be a family member or it can be a close friend, but that is somebody who is able to access the care home at any time and without warning to make sure that you are being cared for adequately, but also, I suppose, to support the incredibly stretched care teams and to contribute to the caring themselves as well.
OK, that's very interesting, isn't it? And, you know, such a critical issue for so many people. Let's go to the Daily Telegraph. This is Angela Rayner, her workers' rights crusade. They just say it's a rights crusade. I'm presuming it's about the rights that workers have, is going to seal the status for the UK as the work-from-home capital because of flexible working requirements. Is that right?
The Telegraph is reporting, and I think we're meant to assume this is part of the changes coming to employment law, that flexible working would be made the default for all workers. So that would be a right, an option for you, rather than something you had to negotiate with your company. It's an interesting choice from the government at a time where business is in a real drive to get people back to the office. That post-COVID, they have realized that often profitability and being able to collaborate and be more creative does require people in the same place. But the figures compiled by LinkedIn, which the Telegraph highlight here, showing that 40% of all jobs advertised in the UK in November were hybrid roles, suggests that this is perhaps something that doesn't need to be fixed by government. That actually, if you are looking for flexible working, you have a lot of options out there right now. That this maybe is something that is panning out correctly between workers and employees. The options are there. Why take that extra step and demand that all employers give flexibility as a default, when actually, if you as an employee want to take that up, it seems like there are a lot of options out there for you right now.
OK. Last story, I think, actually, which is front page of the Telegraph. Where is it? Oh, there we go. It's the SNP, they tell us, considering a ban on keeping cats as pets.
I mean, we can only assume
Sorry, I shouldn't laugh.
that this will be a ban on having a cat as a pet and allowing it outside, because this is about protecting birds and wildlife. If you have an indoor cat, they present no threat whatsoever.
Most people don't have indoor cats, do they?
It's interesting, isn't it? Because in East Asia, they would think that it was very strange for you to allow your cat just to wander around the streets. It's a completely different culture there, where it was more normal to keep your cat indoors. And so I guess that would represent a change. But as a cat owner myself, I can't imagine just allowing my cat out. I have a house cat, and I find it bizarre.
So your cat never goes out?
No, because I find it bizarre to say, thing that I love, just go forth amongst the cars and potentially hazardous outdoor world. I wouldn't have an issue with this law, put it that way.
Really? Wow.
Well, it does say here that it could extend to stopping people from owning them altogether. I really can't think of a policy that would whip up more strong feelings, let's say.
There's stages before banning, isn't it? They're like, you know, bells to warn the birds. Anyway, very interesting. Good choices. Natasha, Kate, thank you very much indeed. See you in a bit. Let's take a look now at the weather. Next few days will bring a northwest-southeast divide, if you can follow that, in our weather. Wet and windy conditions focused in the north and the west. Further south and east should stay largely dry, although thicker cloud drifting eastwards across England and Wales on Monday morning may bring some drizzle. Meanwhile, northwest Scotland and western fringes of Ireland will turn increasingly windy through the day as a band of rain spreads slowly southwards. The best of the sunshine will be across northern and western parts of England and much of Wales. Skies will brighten up later across East Anglia and the southeast as the cloudy skies clear eastwards. The rain, though, moving in the northwest will turn heavy at times, especially over the Scottish Highlands, along with a risk of gales. Rain will continue to push southwards on Tuesday, followed by colder air in the north. Well, coming up next on